Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, dear colleagues, dear partners and friends. Today it was with great pleasure that I was able to kick off the annual We Connect Week, which is a joint initiative of the VUB and the ULB. This week is part of a larger movement, We Connect Brussels, which celebrates its 5th anniversary this year. The VUB and the ULB aim to be urban engaged universities. That is, a university connected to the city, the region and society. For us, Brussels is like a large classroom, a living laboratory. This is reflected in our strong research groups on urban and metropolitan themes. In our SOIL projects, these are community-engaged research and learning projects, and of course, in our We Connect project. In other years, during this We Connect week, every day hundreds of VUB and ULB students would have attended lectures in the context of dozens of courses at locations that are unusual to them all over the city. In companies, government institutions, cultural centers, hospitals and care institutions, sports clubs, town halls, public education centers, international institutions or museums. This year, for obvious reasons, we were forced to change track, but we nevertheless managed to include very exciting activities into the program. I am particularly pleased that even in these not so obvious circumstances, to say the least, teachers and students have given thought to how they could creatively give substance to our ambition to help make a difference in the city or to create a smart, humane city. I cannot repeat it enough. Today's societal challenges are such that we have to build bridges and demolish walls, all the walls. The ambition to be an urban university implies that we take responsibility for the city. It implies forging strong links with the community, with the local authorities, with the schools, with the cultural sectors, with the socio-economic actors and stakeholders. We want to contribute to an urban network in which companies, civil society, the government and universities are permanently connected, interconnected, also to change the city. This We Connect week is part of that. In a moment I will leave the floor to my colleague Karl Moch. But before I do that, I would like to thank all the teachers and assistants who responded so enthusiastically to the call to participate in this very special We Connect week. I would like to thank the many institutions that helped to find ways to set up activities together in these unusual circumstances. I would of course also like to thank our partners today. I would also to express my gratitude to our sponsors, Innoveris, the Flemish Community Commission and the Humanistisch Verbond. I would like to thank the various services of the VUB and ULB who have helped to make all this possible. I also would like to thank our fellows and alumni who helped establish contacts with the partners. Finally, and from the bottom of my heart, I would of course also like to thank the students for actively participating in this very special week. Next year, I promise and I hope that the We Connect week will once again be organized in real life, real circumstances in the heart of our beautiful city. This will undoubtedly be an extremely interesting week. And it will not stop at this week. We will not let go of Brussels. We will never let go of Brussels. I wish you a very pleasant activity.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Karl Merk, and I'm very pleased today to have the presence of Meeri Haataja and Rob Heyman to talk about how can we make artificial intelligence and algorithm transparent in cities. We are delighted as the FARI Institute, AI for the Common Good Institute, the recently and very newly inaugurated institute in Brussels, It's a joint initiative from the Vrije Universiteit Brussel and the Université Libre de Bruxelles. As two universities in the heart of a city, it's very important for us to be able to address the issues that cities face every day. Among them, and being an AI institute, the question of how do we make our algorithms transparent? How do we make our AI systems transparent is one of the key topics for the coming years. And I'm delighted today to have the presence of Meeri Haataja. She's the co-founder of Saidot, and she has been working a lot on how to make AI transparent. She's also an affiliate of the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard, and she has worked over the past years, notably with cities like Amsterdam and Helsinki. And I'm not saying too much. She will have the pleasure of explaining what she has done and how she did it with these cities. And I think the goal of today is to maybe start the debate within Brussels of how can we make these technologies more transparent, explainable, understandable. Rob Heyman will be here today as a researcher from VUB SMIT at the VUB to be able to talk about how do you teach about these technologies? How do you teach about how they are used within the cities? He will present different initiatives, educational, using cards, for instance, tech cards like the Blindspot project. But he will also talk about initiatives within Belgium on how to teach about AI and all its challenges. So I'll leave you the floor, Meeri, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is it's so great to be here discussing, and I hope to open also a lot of new contacts. So feel free to send or ask any questions during or after this presentation. So I hope you're seeing my screen. Can you confirm that?
Yes, it's we see your browser. It's not full screen, but we see it.
That's yeah. Okay, so great. Let me see if I can still get this.
But we can see it perfectly. So if
okay, good. All right. So really pleasure to be here. I think we have roughly 30 minutes for this presentation. What I will be sharing is very much based on the experiences I have had honor to learn while working with our customers. The most visible ones are cities of Amsterdam and Helsinki, who recently, or almost half a year ago already, published their public AI registers and raised quite nicely a lot of discussion in media and different discussion forums around city and public authorities AI transparency and how that can be tackled. But we're also working with a lot of other organizations, both from public sector, but also from private companies. Not all of them are this visible and open as these two leading cities, but there are a lot of organizations who are working in this area and thinking of and exploring the opportunity of using AI registers as a means for addressing on an operational level the transparency that we know is one really key ethics principles or even foundational how I see it. I will come back to that. What I was planning for this session, let's start from the question why. That's how we typically address, or that's the first question for when we start to ask questions related to AI systems. Why does this system exist and what's the purpose? So let's start this presentation as well. Why do we need AI transparency, and especially in the public organizations and local governments context? Then I'll move on to defining transparency. Finally, I will show in practice how does it look on a concrete level, how to actually operationalize and work on transparency. That comes into how we are enabling also as Saidot as a company, trying to make it as easy as possible for the organizations, and then wrapping it up. And hopefully this is really an opening for a longer conversation, so feel free to be in touch at any point, and let's definitely continue the discussion. Also, I want to really mention that we are talking about a new area, so my work is one of the biggest and most important stakeholder groups for us while developing this is really universities, different research centers who are working to understand and define, look at this question and problem from different aspects. So it's definitely not ready. What I will share here today is what we understand to date, and that will definitely evolve as we learn more about this topic. But let's start from the motivation. Why is it important? We have been working in this area now roughly 3 years. Our company was founded 2.5 years ago, and before that, obviously, we had started to really see that transparency is important. It's going to be one of the most important new aspects or principles we need to find good ways to put in place. But why is it important in the government segment in the context of local governments and cities? I think that comes very quickly into how the democratic societies in general work. So we don't need to innovate anything that much new from that perspective. Openness is already essential how our democratic societies work. In many democratic societies, we have specific regulations related to information openness of government activities. And this is actually, there are similar laws all across Europe, in the North America and so forth. These are 4 points that I have taken from the Finnish information openness of government activities, which underline really well what are we looking for when talking about openness in the government and city context. Openness of government activities and also the ways how government is using algorithmic systems allows monitoring the exercise of public authority and use of public resources. It allows opportunity for anyone to freely form an opinion also about this exercise of public authority. Really importantly, it allows opportunity for anyone also to influence the exercise of public authority, public power, or that's really one of the key targets. And finally, to protect your own rights and interests in relation to any services provided by public authorities, or in general, how public authority and public power is used. So we can definitely, and when we are looking for ways how to apply transparency, openness into AI context, we definitely look for ways to be able to fulfill these same targets in the context of societies where more and more of that public authority and public power is actually used via algorithmic systems, and the public authorities actually used already when developing those systems, and they influence our lives, our opportunities, public services in so many different ways. On the right hand side, actually, you can read how we define this and talk about this need in the white paper that was written by myself and two colleagues from City of Amsterdam and Helsinki, Linda van der Vliert and Pasi Rautio from Helsinki. You can download that white paper from our website. So that's where we go through a lot of these things in a different format. So while creating AI transparency, we're really creating a platform for anyone to be able to actually have an access and collaborate with have knowledge how public authority, public power is used in relation to ourselves. But also it has many different purposes from the public authority AI team's perspective. I would say most importantly, it creates a platform for collaboration, collaborative governance, allowing more people to actually influence, review, contribute what kind of systems we're developing. And it creates a platform for those people who have the responsibility to develop good and beneficial systems which are deployed in a responsible manner, which consider the risks and impacts to on a like enough wide way. It allows also this actually knowing enough so that you can be accountable of these systems. So essentially, it's a it's creating a platform for a lot of collaboration that enables responsible development, deployment, and use of these technologies. Transparency is really one of the key principles in most of the AI ethical principles that we have seen over the being created over the last few years. When we sort of take it as a given that, or understand that transparency is really a key principle and important factor, the next question typically is that, okay, what kind of transparency? How do we define transparency so that it's good fit for the purpose that we are trying to achieve with that transparency? That is something that, and that's a really important question. Can be a very difficult question as well if you try to find one definition for it. Based on our understanding, our learning throughout these years, I would summarize that transparency is always contextual and audience dependent. Think about, for example, what kind of transparency we would need to provide for anyone, any citizen who is impacted by public services that are using AI as part of delivering that service. What is understandable by anyone in the city who is influenced by these systems? On the other hand, what kind of transparency would be needed by human operators, for example, in a healthcare organization, if we use AI in providing recommendations for doctors or nurses, what kind of transparency they would need in order to be able to trust and understand enough so that they can trust the system's recommendations or do decisions that not to use those recommendations. It's a different kind of transparency. Moving on, if we are thinking about overseeing these systems and auditing, assessing these systems in different ways, there are specialists, technical specialists, or specialists in different aspects of social sciences who need, again, different kinds of transparency in order to be able to do their assessment in a thorough way. And finally, originally there is this team and all the people within the organization and the partners who are involved in developing and deploying these systems, and we need to think about their perspective. What is that kind of transparency that actually helps them to govern their systems better and also assess these systems while developing and consider all the right aspects while developing these. So there is absolutely no single right solution to the transparency. We really feel that we must seek for flexibility that allows addressing these different kinds of audiences in a meaningful way, provide right level of transparency with taking into consideration that we don't want to always recreate same information for all those different purposes. So we are looking for that kind of solution that is really allows this flexibility to go from very narrow transparency and understandable by everyone into large detail of how the systems work from different both technical and societal aspects. So that kind of transparency we're looking for, and that's also the challenge that we as a company have started to solve and try to find that way how to address it. I will then show next our definition, starting actually in this page, starting from the bottom. So from those audiences who have the most detailed needs in terms of transparency, the team, AI teams themselves, and also the assessors who need to understand in detail in order to be able to do some kind of assessment to these systems, and then going into more outward directed view to this transparency and what might be needed by single citizen and user of these systems. how we have come into this model that we are using, and that is used by our customers, including Amsterdam and Helsinki, is that there is a lot of research done on this area. That's obviously a baseline going through what we have learned from academic research on what is good transparency, what kind of AI governance we need to take care of, what is the good governance. We have also, throughout these years when developing this approach, we have had different kinds of user surveys and studies, collaboration and testing with the end users of this information. And that means, most importantly, citizens in different kinds of settings, asking from them what kind of information they would like to see, showing that kind of information in a use case context and getting feedback for that. We have also interviewed a lot of AI ethics experts, but also technical experts who are working on these, and obviously then worked hands-on with the AI teams within these organizations who are developing. And this is where we have come to date, and now really underlying that we are learning every day about this, what is good transparency, what all aspects we should consider. So this is also very much an evolving document and metadata model on understanding the different aspects of algorithmic systems and how we are governing them. It all starts with the overview, and that's probably the most important information when we are talking about public AI registers and communication to citizens who might not have any background and might also have limited interest towards familiarizing all of this information. So in the overview, we really ask the question why, what is the purpose that the system is built for, what kind of, who is impacted, who are the impacted people, stakeholders, and what kind of impact does it have to the society. We also encourage our customers, as part of that overview description, to describe on a high level how the system works. If that's the only document that is read by the users, they are supposed to get that high level understanding also how the system is working in order to achieve that target of the system. Another very important area, and if we look at AI ethics in general, accountability is one absolutely important aspect. Who takes the responsibility? How do we define a responsibility of these systems, also related to liabilities? So in accountability, we obviously want to identify the organization and its department that is responsible for developing this system, but also about the impacts of the system throughout its life cycle. So there needs to be a legal entity who is responsible and also knows that they are responsible for anything related to the system. For external use is important, and still talking about what is absolutely important for the citizen audiences. Contact details. So if I want to contest this system, or if I want to learn more about this system, something that is that I cannot find from the public sources, who are the people who can be contacted, and via which channels I can get in contact with the people who are responsible for this system. Then we have several different things that depending on an organization, obviously, whether or not it is meaningful to bring everything publicly available is a good question. But external suppliers, that's also what you can find from the, for example, Amsterdam's and Helsinki's registers. It is important to know who are those companies, who many times are external companies and technology suppliers who are developing these systems for public authorities as well. Being explicit and open about that one is very important part of transparency. Then there are some internal roles that is important for the internal governance perspective. Typically, it's very beneficial to have a service owner for the system and also identify who is the technical owner of the system. finally, in the accountability, the whole question of audits and third-party auditors and different kinds of assessments that have been done for this system. The accountability section is the place for providing that information, whether or not the system has been audited, or and if available, access to audit reports as well. Then we go into move on into topics that, based on our research and feedback that we have received from these public AI registers, are more of that kind of information that is interesting for specialists and people in different civil society organizations, journalists, or in general have more interest towards understanding in detail how the system works, or different aspects of the governance of these systems. So data sets, that's obviously, data is the bloodline of the system. So it is very important to make it explicit what are all those data sets that have been utilized in training and operating this system. We give a structure for how to, and really the targeting all of this is that we can easily compare also systems between each other. So there is a clear structure for what all information we are interested in relation to data sets, and how to structure that information. Obviously, how the data set has been sourced, what kind of data, what is the information that it is depicting, possibly sample data, is it personal data or non-personal, pseudonymized, anonymized, and so forth, and how this specific data set has been used. Is it used in training or testing, validation, or operating the system? So there has been actually a lot of research in this, so how data sets should be described and made transparent. So we have obviously tried to learn everything from those researches, like the data nutrition labels work from the US universities and so forth. The next one is data processing. That's the model, the algorithm itself. How does it work? Over there, the good structure for that, what we have learned, is to describe how the model architecture works. Typically, there are different kinds of sequenced steps in the data processing. It is one single very beneficial contribution to understanding how the system works is to actually have a model architecture picture as part of your disclosure. So that's important. Then how the performance is measured in this context, possibly test reports and so forth. What are the key features, important features that are the most important ones for the model outcomes. Repositories, of source code if possible, and finally what kind of computing resources and how much computing resources and time is used while creating this one. Then we come into more the ethical considerations from understanding how the system itself has been built into the ethical considerations and aspects that are not that much technical anymore, or only technical, but also a lot of other aspects. So non-discrimination and fairness is obviously that's highlighted on this level, because it is one of the most important and biggest concerns in terms of AI ethics and use of AI in different, especially high-risk contexts. So we are interested about how the team that is developing this system has worked in order to avoid the potential harmful biases, and how does the system and the team running it promote equality and help the realization of equality in the context of this system in practice. The topics over there, obviously the whole question of how fairness has been defined in this context, and how the team has been testing unfair for biases in this system context. That's important metrics over there and reports of those test results. Then other two aspects, accessibility is really important part of non-discrimination and equality. whether or not the system is accessible and how that has been addressed. And also, finally, one of the most important means and good means for avoiding creating discriminative systems is really to have broad enough stakeholder engagement while developing this system. So this is the place for the teams to communicate how the different stakeholders that are influenced by the system, either directly or indirectly, have been consulted and been part of the development process, and what kind of feedback we have received from these key stakeholders on the system. We continue to risk management. So in a way, you could also see non-discrimination as one specific type of risk. That is true. We also encourage all our customers really to put in place a proper risk catalog, looking at not only privacy and data security related risks, what typical AI teams are very familiar with addressing and analyzing, but also all other kinds of risks which are often related, for example, to health and safety related aspects, or any kinds of human rights related risks, children's rights or workers' rights and so forth. So this kind of systematic risk catalog is really an excellent tool for making sure that you have addressed and really seen risks in a broad enough manner and found a good mitigation means for addressing those risks. Human oversight, one key aspect. It's really important to understand what is the level of automation of this system, what are the mechanisms, how humans are in control of deciding where this system is deployed, or are they reviewing every individual decision done or recommendation by the system. So there are different levels of automation that we see in the full scale of different kinds of AI systems. Over here in this area, we want to understand how is the human involvement, how human oversight handled in this specific system context, but also what are the needed skills and what kind of training is needed for those human operators or the people who are responsible for doing that oversight in practice. And finally, we have this area where we are covering a lot of other aspects, many legal aspects, privacy, data security related documentation that might be handled and developed in outside this register. We are attaching basically all relevant information that is necessary for anyone who needs to have a full understanding how the system and different aspects related to it are governed. Explainability is then the last individual type of question, and that's definitely very important, especially in that context where we have decision type of systems which are leading to really automated decisions. Explainability meaning here capability to provide reasons for one individual decision created by the system. So that was a quick view into all of those areas that how we define transparency. And now, depending on the audience of this information, it is always obviously the decision of that organization who is providing that transparency to their different stakeholders, that to what extent they are willing to publish that information and for via which channels for which audiences. But in general, thinking about the experiences from Helsinki and Amsterdam and their AI registers, the structure has appeared to be very meaningful. Not all of those all detailed points under the key sections of the structure have been made public yet, and that's something that really where we are balancing with this kind of what is enough information, what is too much information, and so forth. But yeah, so that's a baseline that any organization thinking of creating AI registers needs to go through internally and then decide specifically which part of that is made public for the different stakeholders. This is how it looks for the AI team. So when we are working with our customers in public sector or private companies, the platform that we have developed for this one, we want to make it super easy and intuitive for the users to create that transparency. The fact is that it's hard work to actually come up with all that information that we would like to have in place. So we need good tools for making that process. That's a new process for any organization to be able to create this information systematically across all their systems and to maintain it over the whole life cycle of the system. So this is how does it look for the AI teams and anyone who is actually creating this information during the development process within the organization. And whenever it is ready on the platform to be published and the organization wants to share it with their stakeholder, whether privately or via public AI registers, then we can go into the publishing process. And this is how does it look then in the public AI register of Amsterdam. Actually, I have it here, so maybe I show it from over here. From over there, you can see that it's essentially a gallery of different systems deployed by the city. And then when you go into seeing one of these systems, you will first see this information that is meant to be understandable for anyone without any with any kind of background. It needs to be understandable really without further technical understanding, for example. And then we have information over here for anyone to go into more detail based on their interest and specific interest. Finally, one really important part of this public AI registers of cities and what is really also key area of further development is that we can provide feedback, and obviously that is feedback and this collaboration with the users who are looking at this information. You can rate or give your feedback whether the information was useful, and the newest one in the Amsterdam register, you can actually provide this system-specific feedback, particularly related to this system and any other system. So if you want to for example, give comments related to how risks have been analyzed, or you think there is something that the team hasn't considered, or at least hasn't documented over here that is important from your opinion, you are free to provide that feedback for the developing team, and they will get access to that one. And that's really the feedback loop, what we are looking over here to get that conversation going on with the citizens and influence possibility really not only to read information related to how AI is used in the city, but also to take part in it and contribute by giving feedback and on sharing opinions. So trying to summarize, there has been a lot of information summarizing over here, but thinking of those organizations and maybe thinking of starting to put in place AI transparency in a city context, what are the things that we have learned and what to prepare for? I think it's very important to understand, or what we have learned while doing this one is that it's hard work. It's definitely not easy. There is no place where all this information already exists. The whole AI governance is a new area, so we are actually introducing a lot of new practices for the city and organizations, AI teams to take into use and start creating that information, so that you can actually start also sharing that information. So So what we have seen is that new governance roles are emerging while we take into use AI registers and start to create transparency. We need to define who is responsible for putting down all this information, for doing those governance considerations, risk analysis, and so forth. It's not straightforward that it's obvious like this and this current role. That is a question of every organization that needs to be addressed. Who are the persons who are well positioned to take a lead and responsibility over the governance and also coordinating the creation of this information. As a guideline, I would say that it is important that these people are very close to actual development and creation of these systems. So optimally, the roles needs to be found from those teams, or create new roles created within those teams, AI teams of the city organization. It is very important to notice that very rarely these systems are developed in isolation within one organization. There is a whole supply chain of different organizations who are providing either ready-made off-the-shelf technologies or developing new systems for the organization. So that is super important to remember, that we need to also involve the suppliers in this process of creating transparency. This is something where Amsterdam has actually pioneered as well. They have created specific contract terms for that address specifically the question of transparency in relation to suppliers, AI suppliers of the city. So that's good. Good to remember that all the important stakeholders need to be involved as well, meaning the suppliers as well. And finally, I would say that obviously culture of openness. You can look at that from two different aspects. Either you can see it as a risk, that if you're open regarding how you're using technology, how what are you doing in your organization, that's obviously can see that from a risk perspective, that you might receive feedback that might not be always positive. What we try to, and what is obviously the standpoint that Amsterdam and Helsinki here have taken, and what we also try to encourage all of our customers to see it totally from a different perspective. It's an opportunity to involve and get that very early and quick feedback on how your systems work, and actually sort of crowdsource a lot of knowledge and feedback, points of views about these systems, and that will allow you actually to faster identify also problems and fix those problems, because essentially that's what everyone wants, to be able to deploy beneficial systems and manage the risks in a good way. So
we have a question for you, Meeri, maybe?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
So we have a question from Niels. So for the non-discrimination and bias section, what approaches and methods do you use to provide feedback? In other words, how do you determine bias?
This is something, if it would be that straightforward, we would obviously have that definition out there. But that is something that when you familiarize with this area and all kinds of different applications, it's definitely very context specific. So what we really encourage in our model is that the team needs to consider it in that system context, have a definition for fairness in their system context, depending on what kind of system they are developing. I was just reading one article where 20 different kinds of fairness metrics were introduced. So we are not recommending any one single metric for that one. We are recommending our customers to have a clear definition for that system context, be open regarding what is their definition, how they are addressing this, and how they are managing that. So including how it has been tested. So there is no one answer for that one. We encourage our customers to be open how they are defining it, and then have it open for feedback.
Thank you very much. So do you have a word to close, or?
Yeah, so finally, this is really, I think, while I really want to prepare anyone who starts to work on this transparency to prepare for actually hard work on that area. It's going to be taking you to new areas and requiring new kinds of operations and processes within the organization. But also, while we have noticed this and all the work that organizations who are taking it seriously and starting to put in place systematic governance and transparency, we see that that it's actually performing in a way that we exactly expect transparency to work. So it by default, when we seek for transparency, we are starting to do very practical actions for creating more and better governance for these systems, and better managing the risk related to those. So it's sort of like, is all the work that needs to be done there is the evidence that it's needed, and it's actually having the wanted influence on the organizations seeking for creating transparency. But finally, really, what is the most important? Transparency is never a means at itself. It's end as itself. It's a means for accountability, means for collaboration, more people to be able to understand and give feedback, take part in governing these systems. So I think that is the area where the journey has really only started, and that is the area which is really under development, and we are looking to find new ways for all that collaboration between the different stakeholders, whether it's citizens or civil society organizations, activists, and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meeri, for your presentation. It was really enlightening, and I hope it will also start a conversation within Brussels. I will now leave the floor to Rob Heyman from VUB SMIT Lab. You have the floor is yours, Rob. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me grab my presentation and share my screen.
In the meantime, for all the people on YouTube, don't hesitate to ask questions, and we will relay them when possible. So thank you very much.
Yes, I hope to get a lot of questions, and thank you, Carl, and the rest of the FARI initiative to have me. I'll shortly introduce myself, if that's okay, Carl.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Great. So at the moment, I'm an academic, which means that I usually work at different jobs at the same time, because postdoc life is a hard life. So currently, I'm working at the Knowledge Center Data and Society. It's a Flemish initiative where we try to bundle all the knowledge and best practices to make sure that AI in Flanders can be prepared to consider ethical, societal, and legal aspects of artificial intelligence and data-driven applications. But I also have another hat, and that hat is the one where I work for IMEC. It's a Flemish research organization. And specifically, I've been involved at a smart city testbed called City of Things. And I need to mention them because I think a lot of the results I want to show you are part of the research that I did there. So I'm really glad that I can talk about our work there, the transparency engine, where we got the question from City of Things and IMEC to operationalize and start thinking about an approach or a method like the one Meeri just presented to create what they called a transparency engine. It should have been a software thing that would make all projects that City of Things was part of, and they are part of a lot of projects in Flanders, that these projects are transparent by default. Now, I'm a social scientist, so I didn't quote anything. We just started with the definition. And what I want to do in this presentation is give you the definition and give you an overview of where we are right now. I will also refer to Meeri's work and the register she talked about, and then what the main challenges are that we are facing today. And the main challenge, so if you don't want to watch the entire presentation and you have to leave to do something else, you need to remember this one thing. We should be very aware of the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, by which I try to say that we should be very worried when we ask about transparency and explainability without specifying what we mean by transparency and explainability. I'll give a really simple example. When I gave this presentation at City of Things, we had a lot of engineers, and one of the engineers got really angry with me at the end of the presentation because he said, "Rob, you have been presenting for 15 minutes, and in those 15 minutes, you've given me 5 or 6 definitions of transparency, and I'm still not sure which one you're going to take." And it's really important because engineers want to optimize for one type of transparency usually. And I wasn't giving him his one type of transparency to get started with. And I guess that's the main problem. We have a lot of definitions for transparency. They're all high level. So it really depends on how they get implemented. And that's where I want to dive into. Because if you look at what the EU is proposing, either at a high-level expert group on AI or in the GDPR, then you can see that both definitions are quite high level. It's about explaining things, making decisions traceable, and communicating the latter to certain people. In the GDPR, there's a bit more specification. You need to provide transparent information that will enable those who need it to exercise their rights. So there's not only giving information, there's already a goal to that information. But still, it's quite high level because the only thing that the GDPR has created is a lot of mails when it was implemented saying that people had your information and that they wanted to keep on using it, and that we got more explicit cookie disclaimers. Well, that's not the direct consequence of the GDPR, but it's often cited as a consequence. We went to look at another definition, and that's one I really like a lot more, transparency in human-computer interaction. And they, human-computer interaction researchers are, as you can guess, researching interaction between humans and computers. Usually it involves usability issues.
I'm sorry, Rob. Sorry, we only see your presenter side PowerPoint.
So what are you seeing now?
The transparency engine, but your presenter side on PowerPoint.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Let me check where I need to change this.
You need to share the larger screen.
Just a second. Because I can see all the slides and nothing else. That's very unfortunate. I will reshare my screen really quickly, and my apologies for this mix-up. So you can see my desktop now, and you can see the state of the art.
Slide 2, absolutely.
Thank you. And if I move now to the next slide here, you can see the definition of human-computer interaction.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for interrupting. So as I was saying, in human-computer interaction, the first question is usually the one involving the human. It's about what do humans want from transparency? And there they found out that, well, transparency isn't that easy because you have at least 2 definitions you need to take into account. You have your prospective transparency, things you need to know as a user before you get started, and things you want to know after you got started, when usually something is wrong. And I'll tell more about that in a few seconds. First, I want to measure the temperature in the room. I cannot really see all the chats or other ways of interacting with us here in this Zoom session. But do let me know if you are sure that your transparency for your company you are currently working is adopted to your key audience. Usually when I ask this question, yes, Carl?
No, you can all answer in the chat on YouTube, and it's the only way, but we'll relay the questions as soon and comments.
Cool. So just think about where you are working now and whether all the things you are doing with personal data or with AI for your users is explained in such a way that it's adapted to the audience that you are most interested in. When I ask this question to people working in smart cities, their answer is usually no. So I'm curious. I hope, of course, that Meeri always adapts her information, and I think she does it quite well. But usually people are kind of frowning their eyes, and especially in Europe, they'll say, we have a privacy statement, and that's more than enough. Carl, did you get any reactions?
Not yet.
Not yet. And I'll just wait one more second. No? And,
I think we can move on, and I will let you know when someone writes. Sorry.
I think the main reason why it's so hard to adapt these messages to key audiences is because we don't do it. We just are here at the state of the art. When we talk about transparency, this is what most people understand about being transparent to end users or clients. They inform people that they are using certain cookies, for example. Now, this is, of course, a bit limited to online environments. Imagine having that in smart cities, having all these plates or notices explaining you that you are being tracked one way or another. We only do that for cameras here in Belgium. It could be worse if we started visualizing privacy statements and terms of service, as you can see in this artwork on this slide. These were, I think, several terms of service and privacy statements you agreed on for different social media services. And the problem is that apparently we don't read them. If you want to learn more about it, there's a great documentary, Terms and Conditions May Apply. If you didn't like the social dilemma or you want something that delves a bit deeper in one of the aspects, do watch Terms and Conditions May Apply. It's a documentary investigating why we are not reading these terms and conditions and privacy statements. Turns out it's not your fault. These things are used to be written in caps lock, and there's proof that reading things in caps lock is the most difficult script to understand or keep your attention at what you're reading. And in my personal research, when I did my PhD, I saw the same thing. Social media, for example, are being transparent about what they do, but they do it in a very special way. And remember that I told you to consider this fallacy of misplaced concreteness. I wanted to say that they are transparent. This example of social media, for example, they are transparent in that regard, that they have terms of service, that they have a data use policy or a privacy statement. But if you ask when and where they show it, you can already see on this slide that most people will not have clicked on the terms. Why? Because you are forced in this registration setup, which is already 7 years old by now, you are forced to give your email address, a password, your birthday, your gender, but there's no check whether you really read the terms of service or the data use policy. And what is more, if you look at the choice of font and the color, you could say that by clicking sign up, you agree to our terms sentence is the most unreadable and least prioritized sentence of this sign up box from Facebook. And that's where I wanted to remind you of when we talk about this fallacy of misplaced concreteness. When we start demanding in the EU, it's the government demanding this, but also consumer and NGOs, organizations are demanding transparency to protect consumers and end users. We should be really careful to be able to explain what type of transparency we want, because we could end up with something like this: transparency that is in some way operationalized so that you don't actually read it, so that these companies can say we are being transparent, but nobody is reading it. So why are we bothering in the first place? With AI and smart cities, there is still this newness, and we hope everything will be different. And I'm here to say, because I already researched social media, that we should be very careful. Why? Because in the past, we also demanded more privacy and transparency, but we ended up with this. There's also an older example. If you're really old, you might remember the P3P platform, the privacy preferences platform started by the, and now I have to go and check, sorry, because I always forget the name, W3C platform. I'm sorry, I cannot see my cursor, so I cannot travel there. Let's simply continue. What I was going to say is, we used to have this privacy preferences platform that provided privacy statements online in a machine readable format, so that your browser could assist you in reading those and checking whether those preferences or privacy statements matched with your preferences. And they would only load websites if these preferences matched. The platform was never used because nobody, well, at least on the supplier side, the websites themselves, saw any value in that. Again, I'm pointing this out. Why? Because we should be able to have a demand for transparency, but we should not only be able to say we simply want transparency, we should be able to say what kind of transparency for whom. And if we have that, we should be able to evaluate that these explanations make sense. And I've only found one scale up till now that does this, that actually asks or demands that algorithms and software have a satisfying explanation. So you can click on the link. I will share a presentation afterwards. And these researchers have found one scale in which you can actually ask whether the scale whether transparency or explainability makes sense. And now I want to give you some examples. So I will end this slideshow and go to a website we designed for this purpose. If I can find my cursor again. You probably cannot see this, but I can no longer see my own cursor. So it's really hard for me to navigate to the correct tab.
You can share and unshare and then reshare. And I think if you share only your browser, you should be good.
Try to do that again. But even the unshare button is lost on me. I'm sorry. Yes, almost there. So my apologies for these technical hiccups. We decided to create a website to answer these questions and trying to face this fallacy of the misplaced concreteness by asking, if you want transparency, what does this transparency mean? And the first thing we wanted to do there is develop city personas. So people that could be part, that live or pass in your city. And they have different demands with regard to transparency about smart city projects that use sensors, that use algorithms, machine learning applications to create a specific output from the data they have discovered, and then do something with it. And what you'll see is that if you start talking about who might these people be, you already get a good guess about the type of transparency they require. If you look at Bernadette, for example, who likes shopping in the city we're at, then you'll understand that if cameras start watching her and learning from her behavior, that you'll need to be able to create transparency in such a form that she's able to get the most important parts in under 1 minute. And it also needs to be part of the streets, because she will not use her smartphone to look up whatever someone is referring to. If you then look at someone else, for example, a participant that is working as a guinea pig in your living labs from your smart city projects, then you'll see that you need a little bit more information. And so we decided to have these different personas that help you understand that there are indeed different needs, but also that these people will use the information provided to different ends. And that's really important. The one that usually works when we try to make people interested in transparency in the first place are troublemakers, people who actually want to, well, not sabotage your project, but that have an agenda to question whether you are doing the right thing with regard to their rights as a citizen. Great. So the first question I asked in the start was, did you adapt your privacy or transparency communication to a key audience? And usually people say, no, we didn't. We just created a privacy statement or something else that is quite general. We can now say, well, go and have a look at these different persona and see to whom you want to cater with your transparency communication. And then you'll already see that information needs to be prioritized in different ways. Which brings us to our tools. And I think Meeri already gave a great example of one of the tools, this algorithm or AI register. I think it's great if you want to know what is happening on a general level and you already know where to find this information on a website, then this is a great way. And other ones, and I cannot go into detail with all of them. The one on the left is a data flow mapping. It's actually a very simple method using post-its for transparency within smart city projects that are still under development, because even people working on these projects usually don't have the full picture, because the full picture has been scattered over different organizations, governmental organizations, but also commercial organizations and research labs. That's the quadruple helix for you, but that also means that this information is lost within this quadruple helix. And then I wanted to show you my final, but you cannot see it here. Just a second. I wanted to show you our final work. For that, I need to go to my Google Drive. Working on this transparency on demand, if you want, or personalized transparency, we started working on tech cards. Tech cards are cards that try to simplify information about the technology so that you can grasp it at a glance. I did not have time to translate them, but during the COVID crisis, a lot of governments started talking about contact tracing, and we wanted, as social scientists, to understand who wanted what kinds of sensors that tracked them, or which one they felt the most comfortable with and with what types of tracking technology they felt the least comfortable. The problem was, in this survey, people could fill in that they wanted to be tracked via GPS, via their cell phone signal, via geofencing, Bluetooth, all kinds of possibilities. But we noticed that even we as researchers had trouble explaining what these sensors did. And so we created tech cards to kind of via a drawing and really short texts, try to explain what these different sensors are doing. So in this example, you can see trilateration via GPS. And in the visual, if you have very keen eyes, I'll try to make this bigger in just a second. You can see that on the drawing that GPS uses satellites, that you need at least 3 of them, and that if they have your location, that it's usually correct for a 5-meter radius. If you then switch to cell phone signals, you'll see that they actually are less accurate. You have a 500-meter radius in which they are certain you are in. And so what we did here, and that really links up with what Meeri already mentioned as well, transparency is hard work because you need to know who your key audience is, your target audience, because they might have different questions. They might have different priorities in the required information they need to make a decision on what sensors they find interesting. And this is where my state of the art is at right now. So we have these sensor tech cards, and we now want to move towards algorithms and machine learning applications. And there the problem becomes even more tedious because sensors are physical and they allow you to create drawings that relate to spatial situations. You can actually understand what is happening in a drawing, but with software applications like machine learning, we face a next challenge. We will have to try to visualize abstract processes that cannot be situated in a spatial environment. And so that's what I wanted to say about transparency. The main message was, and I'm at my conclusion here. The main message is we are right to demand transparency in this new AI era. And we are especially right to demand it in smart cities. As Floridi was quoted in Meeri's presentation, this should be a public right, even, and is a public right. But we should be very careful when we demand transparency. We should be able to say for whom we want it, or at least have some kind of satisfactory scale so that we can evaluate whether these approaches make sense. So what I'm saying is, let's not fall for this trap that is called the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, where we only ask rights for principles. We should try to move one step further and be able to operationalize these rights like transparency, so that we can actually evaluate whether our KPIs or goals have been met. And I'm really worried for the moment that with the current type of transparency we have in the AI high-level expert group, for example, and other AI principles, that they are way too high level. When we look at Europe, for example, with the GDPR, we still only have the high-level principles and very little sector-specific guidelines on what this transparency might mean. And if we don't define them, and with we, I think we need to refer to consumers, non-governmental organizations, and civil society, so those parties that represent end users and consumers. If we don't demand what transparency is, I think the industry will probably find a definition, but I don't think it will be satisfactory to most of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. And so there is a question that I have for both of you, Meeri and Rob. In order to maybe understand what transparency means, but in order to also understand how this concept applies to AI and all technologies being used in the city, maybe there is a need for an early education on these topics. And have you an idea on how and when and maybe at what age we should start also learning about these concepts? Because Transparency is a complex topic even for academics, and when embodied in websites or tools like the one that Meeri has created, the question remains how, in order to use these tools, we need educated citizens. And so when and how does it start? And so it's a very open question for both of you. Maybe Meeri or Rob, I let you do.
Meeri,
right.
you already have something, or otherwise I'll start.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, that's definitely true. Like, we need for citizens a lot of understanding how to use this information and take part in that sort of democratic oversight of these systems. So I don't know, like, I will let it leave it for the education experts to decide what is the good time for that one. But also we need it for more understanding on how to create transparency. What do we mean, and how to serve transparency. We need that understanding, more skills and education in this area also for AI developers. So that's where I'm looking for universities. We are actually right now starting collaboration with several universities, and actually like very open to, if there are some in the audience, people from different universities, to take these practical exercises into the data science studies within the university. So I think that's the first step to actually get those people who are developing these systems to actually see AI governance and transparency as a normal part of every single project, and develop their skills on how to work on these topics. Then we will have something that can be provided for wider society to collaborate. Yeah, but obviously it needs to happen at the same time. Maybe Rob, you can comment on the other side of the coin, the civil society, and how to educate people to use this transparency and collaborate.
Yeah, great. I wanted to comment on that side, so I'm really happy that you'll pass me that one. Yeah, I think we need to start as early as possible, and that would mean in kindergarten. I guess we are no longer used to question technologies. On the one side, this has led a lot of people to simply accept the terms of service because well, there's no alternative. Even if you don't agree with your word processor and how the terms are provided there, you're going to use the software anyway. So there are a lot of fatalistic people out there that believe that it doesn't really matter anymore whether you read these things or not. And on the other side, I think we need to demand that people start informing themselves again. I mean, even in Belgium, people are burning 5G towers, right? Well, have been burning them. I don't think they're burning any of those right now at the moment, but people are doing this. People are very worried about vaccines and whether they are safe or not. So there's a lot of transparency that doesn't work, and we should be able to teach everyone of our society to go and look for information if they have any doubts, and be able to say, well, is this information satisfactory? Meaning, do I trust this information? Do I trust the people who wrote it, and so on? And I think so on the demand side or the user side, we cannot start earlier than we should start as early as possible, of course. And I guess that also turns me to the supply side again. We really sucked at transparency too long, I think. Anyone who needs to provide transparency, which has led to this, should we call it, transparency is not being used for what it should be used, and people are prone to making myths about new technologies that are not true, but that are very persistent. And these myths, I guess, are the things that will hurt technology adoption the most.
Thank you. We received also a question, but it's about what has been done in terms of AI registries in Brussels. So that leads me also to a question for you, Meeri. Have you heard about anything being done in Brussels? And what type of advice do you give city officials or city representatives who are, considering the idea of implementing such a registry?
I have that same question, and I would love to connect with anyone who knows the answer to what is happening in Brussels at the moment. So maybe this is a good kickoff. I'm not actively working yet with Brussels on this topic. My most important advice is that please use the work that has been done by others in this space, because I know there is this is a new topic, and typically the process goes that you start to structure and make your own definitions and do that research. So what I really want to encourage, and that was why we started the work with Saidot, is really understanding that there is no capacity. It doesn't make any sense that everyone does that work individually within one organization. We really need to build on each other's work and take into use what has been already found out by researchers and by organizations who are doing it. So I really encourage that jump into the moving train and let's take it further there. This is not ready, so there is fast development. We learn every day something new about this one. So don't start from the beginning. Start jump into what others have figured out, and then let's go on and take it further from there. So because that will save you 2 years easily, compared to starting to figure everything out, define everything from the beginning. So.
Thank you, and that leads me to you, Rob. What has been done, and what could Brussels count on and also benefit from?
Well, we used to have a mandatory provision in the data protection regulation of Belgium before the GDPR. Before the GDPR, there was a European directive which stated that data protection authorities had to keep registers from any entity gathering personal information. So they had these registers, but with the GDPR, they outsourced this work to the organization that gathered the data itself. So there's no longer centralized data registry. So I guess you could say the work was being done by local municipalities that then send it out to data protection authorities. But now it's no longer centralized thanks to the GDPR. So we are, in a way, taking a really big step back there by delegating all these responsibilities to local governments, which all have their own systems and ways of keeping these data registers. So I think a lot of work should, again, be forced onto a centralized system where we gather these different data registers in a certain universal form.
So there is a link that I posted, or the name of an initiative in Brussels by the Metro and the Transport Federation, STIB, called Menstruum, and they tried to do something in the same vein as what you're doing, Meeri, meaning a repository, or at least a page explaining what is being done with questions for the users. But so that leads me to another question about the fact that cities right now, and a lot of cities are embarking in the smart cities train, and it's been a while, and a lot of them have also developed guidelines on how to use all these technologies ethically. And I think the question comes of also the liability of cities in case a system goes wrong, or in case a system is maybe not having the intended effects. And so what are the tools that the citizens can have through these repositories? And it's a question for you also, Meeri. What do you envision in terms of maybe actions that citizens could do through your repositories? Is there a way that where Saidot could help citizens also voice their concerns more easily, and also express maybe their refusal for initiatives like maybe I'm taking facial recognition, but it could be other initiatives?
Yeah, as I'm mentioned when closing my presentation, this whole area of collaboration between the different, citizens directly and also the civil society organizations. I feel that's totally new area. We are only very in the beginning of that one. So it's sort of like the enablers that we have now in the public registers, those are sort of teasers of that there is this new area that needs to be figured out and new ways to find out. So what we are now enabling from the platform side, and I cannot speak for any city or any of our customers how they are planning to use it or not, but basically we are seeing a need for being able to share earlier in the process before the system has been deployed into production. So that's obviously where we encourage our customers to go public even in an idea or concept phase and seek for feedback for that idea before you actually have it developed or in a proof of concept phase. So that's one. Then also we see that there is a need for more private and more detailed collaboration and brainstorming around those ideas. So what we are now enabling from the platform side is that our customers can share it privately, for example, with civil society organizations, or it can be external auditor or oversight forum or any other type of organization before, if you are in a situation that you are not ready yet to open it publicly for everyone, you could use universities or civil society organizations as a sort of brainstorming parties or early feedback and here get that involvement from the stakeholders already in the development process. So that's where we need also technical enablers to be able to securely, privately share that information also. Going forward, I'm having many ideas around what kind of also this kind of scalable feedback methods, if we could use more kind of voting mechanisms on the platform and show discussions around the system for everyone, so that everyone could see others' feedbacks and so forth. So, or even reporting how much feedback has been received for this system and what kind of feedback, what are the sentiments of that feedback and so forth. So yeah, maybe to summarize that, there are a lot of opportunities. We're also working with universities to work on those and design those methodologies, how to do that in a meaningful way.
Thank you. And Rob, you said that we need to move one step further. And so could liability be also one of the steps further? Because you said that transparency, maybe as a word, could be very vague, and we need to move out from the fallacy. So in terms of next step, do you foresee any next step for Brussels? And also, how do you see that? And would liability be one of the parts of the equation?
Well, I hope, liability may always be one of the steps, I think, but I'd rather have a more positive motivator. I think Meeri already mentioned it, partly looking at the data as a resource, as a commons to be used for the common good, for example. I think that should be our main, in an ideal world, that would be our main driver, knowing what sensors are around the city, what data is in the city, so that we can repurpose it for other common good activities. And liability, I think, is more related to this individualistic notion where we have rights as citizens and that we can actually retaliate when we feel those rights are not respected. So I'd rather have a more positive one. And I think we are very far from that one. The individualistic vision with liability is already there, partly. And I think we still need to do a lot of work there. I mean, if you are subject to a wrong decision, it still takes way much more time to redress that wrong decision than the time it took to make that wrong decision. So I think we should at least be able to demand that if a wrong automated decision is made, that the process is sped up to, I don't know, depending on the case, only 15 minutes redress procedure, depending on how difficult the problem is that is experienced. If you're taking public transport, like in your example, I think any fault should be resolved in under 5 minutes. Otherwise, you shouldn't start messing with automated transports, because that's the time you need to take a train, I guess.
Well, thank you very much. That closes the discussion. And what I really appreciated in your both presentations is you have the two sides of the same coin, in the sense that in order to ensure more transparency within a city, you need tools, but you also need education. And that could seem like a very just a broad general statement. But I was really happy to see with both of you concrete examples of how it could be done and how it should also be done. So thank you all. I will just share your Twitter handles to all the remaining people online. Please follow also Saidot.ai, and also go and follow IMEX SMIT VUB activity. So thank you all, and I wish you a good night.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.